That evening, Evan and I were having dinner at a small Italian restaurant near my place. Nothing special, just a normal date after a week of him being busy with work. We had just ordered when his phone buzzed. He looked at the screen for about 2 seconds, and then his face changed like he had just seen something he wasn't supposed to see. I hadn't even asked yet when he suddenly stood up. He didn't say sorry, didn't say, give me a minute, he just looked at me and exhaled a long breath. Tina, my ex is looking for me. He said that as if it were a perfectly reasonable excuse to leave me in the middle of dinner. I only managed to say, what do you mean? But he had already grabbed his coat, eyes no longer looking at me. She's hurt. I have to go. I can't leave her alone. I blinked a few times, trying to understand what was happening. We were on a date, weren't we? And he was leaving because of his ex? And he said it in a tone like his responsibility to her mattered more than any plans or commitments with me. I thought I misheard him, but he really did walk out the door, leaving me sitting alone in the restaurant with an unmistakable feeling of being abandoned. I sat there for a few more minutes, trying to convince myself that he was just panicking because someone had an accident. But something wasn't right. The way he spoke, it didn't sound like panic. It sounded like someone being called back and he simply obeyed. What made everything worse was the message that arrived 10 minutes later. I thought he would explain, or at least apologize. But no. The message only had a few words, I don't think we're compatible. I need time. Don't text me. I read it over and over, almost unable to breathe. He broke up with me? While going to meet his ex. Within less than 10 minutes of leaving me in the restaurant? I put my phone down on the table and didn't know whether to laugh or be shocked. People around me were still eating and chatting, while I felt like someone had pulled a chair out from under me in the middle of the room. I'm not the type to panic easily, but the feeling of being disrespected like that made my whole body numb. That night, I paid for the untouched meal, walked out to the street with an empty stomach and a head that felt as heavy as stone. I didn't cry. I just felt cold. I stood on the sidewalk, looking in the direction he had left, knowing something far more suspicious was behind the words, my ex is looking for me, that he had said. I didn't know that this was only the beginning of something even worse, something I would only discover when I returned to the city a few days later. After that night, I stayed in my apartment, lying in bed with my mind spinning, trying to piece together everything that had just happened. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that what happened at the restaurant was not sudden or impulsive. It was the result of a series of signs I had tried to ignore for months. From the very beginning, Evan was the type of person who made you feel overly cared for. He asked where I was going, what time I'd be home, who I was meeting. At first, I thought it was sweet attention. But gradually, the question, who are you going with, became automatic every time I stepped outside. And if I answered that I was meeting male colleagues or old university friends, his face would immediately darken. No arguments, no raised voices, just that long, suffocating silence, followed by, I just want you to be safe, you know that. At first, I believed that. Looking back now, it felt more like control than concern. Then there was the thing with his ex. I call her ex, but in reality their relationship never fully closed. They had broken up for more than a year, yet she would still text him whenever she wanted, when she was sick, when she was sad, when she needed someone to talk to. Once, we were watching a movie together when his phone lit up with her name. He looked at it, immediately turned the screen off, and said, it's nothing important. I asked, why does she message you so much? He shrugged, she doesn't really have anyone close. I'm just helping her. No big deal. It sounded generous, but the problem was that he never set boundaries. It was the same with work. Evan worked in IT support, and I knew very well he could work remotely most days of the week. But whenever I asked him to stay with me for an evening or just come home early one day so we could have dinner, he'd say, I can't. The company needs me. Yet if his ex called at 10 p.m., he was always there immediately. I remember the times we made small plans, cooking at my place, going to the weekend market. All it took was his ex calling or a coworker inviting him for a beer, and he would immediately change our plans, leaving me there trying to reassure myself that he's just busy, even though I clearly felt the sting of being left behind getting sharper each time. There were times I tried to be honest and tell him I felt uncomfortable with how his ex kept appearing at the worst possible moments. Evan never got angry. Instead, he brushed it off by saying I was too sensitive. The words sounded light, but they cut deeper every time he made me feel like I was a backup option. Gradually, I felt more and more like I didn't belong in his life. No big fights, no dramatic events, just this growing sense of standing outside, looking in. And that night, when he left me in the restaurant without a single real explanation, all the doubts I had pushed aside suddenly became painfully, blindingly clear. I didn't know exactly what was waiting for me, but at that moment, my intuition had never been more accurate. That night was just the surface. What lay underneath was far, far worse. After Evan walked out of the restaurant that night, I kept thinking he would at least call once things settled down. I even told myself he was just stressed and reacting poorly. But the reality was much worse. He went completely silent. No explanation, no phone call, no checking whether I got home safely. Just that blunt breakup text, and then he disappeared as if our entire one-year relationship wasn't worth even a second of thought. I stayed up all night in my dark apartment, the kitchen light still on because I had forgotten to turn it off. I stared at my phone, waiting for a "I'm sorry" message or at least a "we'll talk later." Nothing. The next morning I sent him one single message, "Can you tell me what's going on?" He read it. Didn't reply. By noon, I received a text from his sister, someone I barely knew, but who always acted like she understood Evan better than anyone. She wrote, "Don't stress Evan out more. His ex is going through serious mental issues. You have to understand." I couldn't believe what I was reading. I was the one who got abandoned, the one who got dumped without a reason, and they were telling me not to pressure him? I replied politely, "I'm not doing anything. I just want to know if Evan is okay." She saw it, then sent a second message that was infuriatingly condescending. "Evan says you're being a bit sensitive. He's dealing with more than you think." Sensitive? A person who got left alone in the middle of a date and dumped by text, and they dared to call me sensitive? I wanted to be angry, truly angry, but my body just felt exhausted. I turned off my phone, wrapped myself in a blanket, and lay still until evening. My mind kept looping, what is happening? Did he really choose his ex over me? How many signs did I ignore? The next 3 days, Evan still didn't contact me. I tried texting him once more, just to understand what was happening. "Evan, I don't understand. At least explain." The message was ignored. The most humiliating part wasn't just losing my boyfriend, it was being treated like I was a burden. I didn't cry loudly, tears just fell on their own when I washed my face or stared at the ceiling. The kind of crying you can't control, not from sharp pain, but from not knowing where to place the hurt. By the 4th day, I packed a bag and went to stay with Megan, my best friend. She opened the door, took one look at my face, and immediately knew. What did he do? Short, direct, and it hit the exact spot. I just shook my head. I didn't even know how to explain anymore. Megan made dinner for me, then handed me her phone and said, "Block him." I didn't. Not because I wanted him back, but because I wanted to understand why. Not knowing felt worse than the breakup. That evening, things got even worse. I was added to a bizarre group chat with Evan's friends. They sent messages like, "Evan's going through a tough time, please be understanding. Stop texting him, he's under a lot of pressure. His ex is injured, it's serious." As if they were telling me I was selfish. As if I was the one causing trouble. Meanwhile, I was the person who got left behind. I was the one dumped without an explanation. Reading their messages made one thing painfully clear, they had prepared excuses for Evan long before anything happened. And I had never been treated as someone who truly belonged in his life. I was just a temporary fix for his desire to settle, until his ex called, and he went running back instantly. That night, I sat on Megan's balcony. Cold wind hit my face, but I barely felt it. I realized I was gripping my phone as if hoping for some miracle, some apology, some sign he still cared. But that was never going to happen. That night, I decided to return to our city earlier than planned, to clear his belongings from my place and end this completely. But I didn't expect that decision would let me see the truth he should have told me from the beginning. A truth so bitter it almost made me laugh. Evan didn't just go help his ex. He stayed at her place. 4 days. Without returning to his own home even once. But that belongs to P4. And it was far worse than I could have imagined. I returned to the city on Monday morning, feeling half empty and half furious. I no longer hoped Evan would wait for me or explain anything. I just wanted to go home, collect the rest of his things still in my living room cabinet, and end everything completely. But when I arrived at his apartment building to return his spare key, I sensed something was wrong the moment I stepped into the hallway. Evan's apartment was dark. No footsteps, no fridge sounds, no signs of anyone being home for days. I called his name once, just to be sure he wasn't in the bedroom. No answer. The place felt abandoned, cold, and untouched. I placed his keys on the kitchen counter and was about to leave when I noticed a food delivery receipt on the table, from the day before. But the delivery address wasn't this apartment. It was his ex's address. I knew because I had taken Evan there once to pick up something she forgot after they broke up. My heart started pounding. Not because I was curious, but because I felt like I was about to witness a truth so ridiculous that my face automatically tightened in disbelief. Right then, a neighbor opened her door. She looked at me, then at Evan's dark apartment. Looking for Evan, she asked. He hasn't been home for days. I asked, are you sure? She nodded. Sure. I saw him on Thursday. He said he was staying with someone because a person got injured. He didn't say who. I wanted to laugh, but it came out bitter. So he didn't just leave me in the middle of a date, he stayed with his ex. Meanwhile, I got ghosted for 3 days, blamed by his friends, and treated like someone causing trouble. I decided I wasn't going to speculate anymore. I went straight to his ex's address. Not to fight, just to know the truth. When I rang the doorbell, I prepared myself for her to slam the door. But the person who opened it was Evan. His t-shirt was wrinkled, his hair messy, eyes red from lack of sleep. He stood frozen for 3 seconds when he saw me. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I asked him one single question, have you been staying here for days? Evan glanced behind him. His ex was sitting on the couch with a cast on her leg, holding a cup of tea and scrolling on her phone. She didn't look remotely like someone incapable of caring for herself. He swallowed hard. She can't take care of herself. She needs me. I can't abandon someone who was with me for so long. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was hollow. And what about me? Do I not matter enough for you to check if I'm okay? He rubbed the back of his neck, avoiding eye contact. You have to understand, things are complicated. I can't explain everything right now. Is it that you can't explain, I asked calmly, or that you don't want to? That's when his ex finally looked up and said, in the most casual tone ever, it's not that deep. He's just helping me. You're overreacting. Not that deep? He left me in the middle of a dinner date, dumped me over text, disappeared for 4 days, and let his friends scold me, and she had the nerve to say I was overreacting? I looked at Evan. This is how you treat someone you claim to love? You walk out on them and can't say a single decent thing? Evan sighed like I was inconveniencing him. I don't need more drama right now. You're making things heavier. I'm just doing the right thing. The right thing? There was only one thought in my head, this isn't doing the right thing. This is cowardice. I didn't say anything else. No yelling, no arguing. I just looked at him one last time, and in that moment, I finally understood that to him, I had never been a real choice. I was just filling the emptiness when his ex was busy living her own life. The truth didn't hurt as much as I expected. It was simple, painfully simple. I said, "You can stay here, because clearly this is where you want to be." "I won't." Evan called after me, "Tina, don't make this a big deal. You have to understand," but I had already turned away. Walking down the stairs, my chest felt heavy but my mind felt clear. I was no longer trapped in the fog he kept me in. I had seen the truth with my own eyes, and I knew the part he never expected was about to begin. I left Evan's ex's apartment with a clearer mind than ever. I didn't cry, didn't shake, and didn't feel the urge to go back and force him to explain why. When you see someone's true nature that clearly, you no longer need their explanation. What Evan did was more than obvious. He chose her, and chose her in the cruelest possible way toward me. So what came next wasn't, what do I do to get revenge, but rather, how do I live in a way that leaves no room for him in my life anymore? I went back to my apartment, opened the closet, and gathered everything related to Evan, a few shirts he left behind, his toothbrush, the mug he always used, even the little sticky notes he put on my fridge with random reminders. I put everything into a large bag, tied it up, and placed it outside my door. One of his close friends would come pick it up. I didn't want to see him again, and I didn't want to say another word. Then I opened my phone and scrolled through our message history. All those conversations where I softened my tone so I wouldn't stress him out. All the times I convinced myself he was just busy. All the excuses I made for his overly caring behavior. I deleted the messages one thread at a time. My hand trembled the first time, but with each deletion, I felt lighter. I didn't text Evan. I didn't block him right away either. I simply let everything fade, like an echo slowly dying out. A few days later, just as I expected, he started messaging me, "We need to talk. You misunderstood. Give me a chance to explain." I saw the messages. Read them. Didn't reply. Not to play hard to get, not out of spite, but because I genuinely had nothing left to say. Evan called twice, I didn't pick up. On the third call, I blocked his number. No tears, no hesitation, no sense of victory. I did it because it was simply the right thing to do. I also left the group chat. His friends added me to the same group that had pressured me to understand Evan. Before exiting, I sent one final message. I didn't bother anyone. I only sent one message because I was abandoned in the middle of a date and given no explanation. "I wish everyone well." Then I left the group. No one replied. But 2 days later, Megan told me someone from that group called her, asking about what really happened because Evan's story didn't match. He told them I got angry for no reason, blew things out of proportion, and threatened to break up to manipulate him. At that point, his lies exposed themselves without me needing to say anything. As for his ex, a week later, I heard from a mutual acquaintance. She kicked him out. Something happened between them. I didn't ask what. I only knew that Evan's bad decisions finally came back to hit him. Meanwhile, I asked my cafe manager to switch my work schedule to early shifts so I wouldn't have to walk past his neighborhood. I spent more time with Megan, and with myself. On weekends, I wandered through the farmer's market, bought small potted plants for my window, started cooking again. I realized how much I had shaped my life around Evan and forgotten my own interests. The best revenge isn't making someone hurt. It's letting them understand they no longer have any influence over your life. I didn't badmouth him, didn't retell the drama, didn't cling to anything. I just let everything fall where it naturally should and stepped out of his orbit. Evan no longer had weight in my life. And that was the quietest, deepest revenge I'd ever had. A few months after everything happened, my life gradually returned to normal, a kind of normal I didn't remember experiencing for a long time. No more nights waiting for messages, no more guessing what mood Evan would be in that day, no more bending myself to match the emotional pace of someone who didn't know boundaries. Every morning I woke up to a quiet kitchen, the comforting smell of coffee, and a life that felt much lighter. I'm not saying all wounds disappeared instantly. Things like that don't vanish overnight. Sometimes, while standing in line for bread or folding laundry, a strange disbelief would wash over me. Did I really let someone treat me like that? But at that point, it no longer hurt. It felt more like looking at an old item you once thought was important but now no longer fits you. Returning to work with my new schedule, I realized I had more energy to focus. My coworkers said I looked brighter. Megan joked that my face looked like it just dropped 80 kilograms of drama. I laughed too. Not because I was happy Evan was gone, but because my life no longer felt dragged down by someone who didn't understand limits. I saw my friends more often. On weekends, I went hiking, sometimes alone, sometimes with a group. Sometimes I found myself startled by how peaceful I felt. No tension, no bracing for something to go wrong, no analyzing what mood he'd be in tomorrow. One day, Evan sent an email from his old account. A long one, saying he had been reflecting, that he didn't handle things well, and that he hoped I would give him a chance to explain everything from start to finish. I read it and exhaled a long breath. No anger. No sadness. No curiosity. Just distance. I replied with one sentence, "Wish you the best. I don't want to revisit the past." Then I deleted the email like deleting an old reminder that no longer applied. The funny thing is, I didn't feel even a hint of regret. I used to think that if this relationship ever ended, it would feel like losing a huge part of my life. But it turned out that huge part was just a space I filled myself with patience, with kindness, with hope. Evan never truly occupied it. Looking back now, I see something I couldn't see back then. His leaving wasn't a loss for me. It was a release. I was freed from confusion, from half-hearted affection, from nights guessing his emotions, from an unfair battle with a woman he never truly cut off. I don't have a new love story to tell. No, and then I met someone amazing. Just a version of myself that is freer, more grounded, and far more aware of my own worth. If I have to say what remains after everything, it's this: I don't regret what happened. I only regret not leaving sooner. And that is the most complete ending I needed. Not loud, not dramatic, just quietly moving forward at my own pace.